with San Leandro 2050, and we are glad to have you here. So we're going to get started by talking about, after I move this out of my way, we're going to talk about the agenda for tonight. Pretty short, pretty self-explanatory. We're going to talk, we're going to have Chris Hunter from Bayren, Bayren/Stop Waste, talk about the overview of heat pumps, sort of heat pumps 101. And then we're going to have Nicole Green talk about her experience in installing her heat pump, which she did pretty recently. Then we're going to give it back to Chris to talk about rebates and incentives and some resources that you can use to check out and start to do some research for yourself and get started. And then we're going to have Q&A. So next slide. If you were at the previous event, I talked a little bit about the 4 events that we're having and what we're calling our Resilient Home webinar series. And by the way, this is a meeting, so you have the ability to raise hands and speak. So I just called it a webinar because it's a little bit more, it's easier to talk about. But tonight is heat pumps. We're going to talk a little bit, I think, just touch on water heaters. The technology is basically the same, so there's not a whole lot of difference. And then on the February 6th, we're going to talk about induction stoves. They're actually healthier for you and your inside air, as well as better for the planet. And then lastly, we're going to have gray water basics about how you can use actual water from what you use every day to water your garden. So, and that's on the 20th. So I hope if you haven't signed up, you might do that. And the next thing I'm going to do is introduce Chris Hunter, and he's with Stop Waste, but Stop Waste is actually the group that facilitates Bayren in this area. So take it away, Chris.
Great, thank you, Patty. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here with all of you, and thanks for giving some of your time on a Monday. So yeah, my name is Chris Hunter. I work with Stop Waste. For those of you who don't know Stop Waste, we are a public agency serving Alameda County as well as its 14 incorporated cities. And as the name suggests, a lot of the work at Stop Waste really revolves around solid waste reduction and diverting waste from landfills. But there's also a team of us that is focused really on issues related to energy and the built environment. And so that's the team that I'm on. And within this team, a lot of our work is through the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, or BayREN. And BayREN is a collaboration of local governments from across the Bay Area, representing the 9 counties around the region. And really the goal of BayREN is to provide various energy saving programs, resources, and education to help the state meet its really ambitious climate goals. And so we offer rebates and programs for a wide range of stakeholders, including single-family homeowners, multifamily properties, small businesses, and more. Later on, as Patty mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about some specific rebates that BayREN offers for heat pumps. So you can move on. So we know, I'm sure everyone who is involved with San Leandro 2050 knows that in order to avoid the worst consequences of climate change, we more or less need to completely phase out carbon emitting fossil fuels from our economy and our energy system within the next 30 years or so, ideally even sooner. And this process of ensuring that all of our energy comes from clean fuels and non-polluting fuels is referred to as decarbonization. So it's a really complicated issue. A lot of people are intimidated by the word decarbonization, all the things it entails. I just want to start by framing the conversation and why we're talking about heat pumps by breaking it down into these 3 kind of buckets of actions. So the first is just reducing the total amount of energy that we consume. We've been working on this for a long time now through various energy efficiency measures, as well as behavior change. It's really the first. It's just using more efficient technologies, conserving energy, reducing the total amount that we need in order to have a productive economy and carry out our lives. The second big step, which we've in California have made really great progress on in the past 10 or 20 years is transitioning to a clean electricity grid. And so this means all of our electricity will be powered by solar panels, wind energy, hydroelectric, and other renewable non-fossil fuel forms of energy. Again, we've made really great progress, and in Alameda County, everyone is served by East Bay Community Energy, which essentially purchases all of this electricity and procures it on your behalf, and then distributes it via PG&E lines. And so because East Bay Community Energy, they're a public agency, they're really committed to this. They've made really great progress on cleaning up the grid in Alameda County over the past few years. And then the third big step, once we've kind of reduced our demand and make sure that all of our electricity is clean, we'll be converting all of that gas-powered and fossil fuel-powered appliances and machines to run on that clean electricity. So this refers to both our buildings, that's what we'll be talking about today, of switching fossil fuel furnaces and water heaters and stoves to run on electricity. It also refers to electric vehicles and a wide number of other things. And so kind of I consider this the trifecta of decarbonization and really what is informing a lot of what we'll be talking about today. Next slide. So buildings are, in most cities, buildings are the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions after transportation. And really for a long time in California, our buildings have been primarily powered by natural gas. For a long time, we thought that was actually the cleaner source. And in some cases it was, back when our grid was powered by coal and other dirty fuels like that. But as the grid has gotten cleaner, it's now electricity is actually now a lot cleaner form of energy than gas. And there's also been a lot more research that has come out about the really negative health impacts of burning natural gas in our homes. And so as I'm sure, again, a lot of you have heard of, a number of cities across the Bay Area have started to consider various policy levers that they can use to phase out gas combustion in buildings. So I think Berkeley was the first city in the area to ban gas in new construction a couple of years ago. A number of cities across the county have followed suit.
Sorry.
I think San Leandro is in the process. I don't think it's passed yet. Maybe someone knows. I think they're in the process.
It has not.
Okay, but San Leandro is on its way to adopting a similar code for new construction. And then other jurisdictions have now started to consider how they might actually start transitioning existing buildings to retrofit them to run on only electricity. And then also just a few months ago, the state passed Public Utilities Commission approved a policy that would actually ban the sale of new gas furnaces and water heaters starting in 2030. And it's possible that will actually happen sooner in the Bay Area through some local agencies. So it is happening, whether you like it or not. This is the direction that things are moving in the Bay Area and in California, that in 20, 30, 40 years, everything will be all electric. And so we really want to encourage people to start thinking about this now, start preparing, and really get ahead of this if you can, because it'll save a lot of headaches if you can do this your own way and kind of on your own timeline rather than being forced to without a lot of notice. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so we are in the middle of this longer term transition from gas-powered buildings to electric-powered buildings. And there's a lot of implications from this. So the first I want to talk about is time of use electricity rates. So as we've added more and more solar, as particularly solar onto the grid, solar only runs certain hours of the day. And so what happens is during the day when everyone's off at work, total energy use or electricity usage is relatively low. And so we actually have, we've gotten to the point where we can fill most of our need during the day with just renewables. And so energy during those middle hours of the day is actually quite clean. But then you get to 4 or 5 p.m., everyone comes home from work, turns on their TV, turns on their air conditioners, does their laundry. And so demand spikes right as that huge supply of renewable energy is coming off the grid. And so this forces the state to turn on these peaker power plants, which are really dirty, really expensive to run. And so just last year, PG&E automatically put everyone in time of use rates, which means you actually pay more for electricity during those peak hours of 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. So something to consider, that now if we're thinking about lowering your utility bills and being more green, it's not just how much energy you're using, but actually when you're using it. And then in the longer term, we do expect that as more and more people make this transition, gas will become more expensive relative to electricity. And that's because most of the cost of using natural gas comes from maintaining the infrastructure, so the pipelines and things like that, rather than the actual gas molecules itself. And so those are all fixed costs. And so as more and more people transition off of that, a smaller pot of people are going to be stuck paying that same cost. And so getting off early can really save you a lot of money in the long term from getting stuck with all of those costs from maintaining the gas infrastructure. And then finally, when it comes to electrification, I think there's a lot of implications for resilience. So we've seen more and more over the past few years, power shutoff events from PG&E to prevent wildfires. There's always the risk around here of a significant earthquake. And there's actually been studies that have shown that it's a little bit counterintuitive, but in the case of a major earthquake, electricity service would likely come back within a matter of a couple of weeks, whereas gas service could potentially be out for several months. And so if you're thinking of that in terms of resilience, electric appliances might be a bit more resilient. Indoor air quality, I think we'll probably cover this in more detail during the induction cooktop event in a few weeks, but burning methane inside your home turns out is not great for your health. It is one of the leading causes of childhood asthma and a lot of other respiratory illnesses. And so we saw, especially over the last few years with COVID, just how important indoor air quality is and how, making the switch can have big impacts on that. And then finally, we're going to be seeing more and more extreme heat days around the region. And as I'll get to, one of the big benefits of heat pumps is that they provide air conditioning as well. And so these are just I just wanted to introduce these topics because they'll come up again and again throughout this conversation. So you can move on to the next slide now. So just quickly, I want to show this graph, which is how the average home on the West Coast uses energy. And this is both gas and electric combined. And over 50, almost about 60%, it comes to either HVAC, so space heating and cooling, and water heating. Those three uses are really the bulk of where our energy is going, specifically water heating and space heating. If you have gas furnace and gas water heater, even if you install solar panels and batteries in your home and have 100% clean electricity, that means 60% roughly of your energy that you're using is fossil fuels and not benefiting from all of that clean electricity that you're generating. So those are really the biggest uses you can do. And that's why electrifying everything is such an important piece of the puzzle. Can move on. So yeah, I showed that chart earlier with the Venn diagram of getting to a decarbonized economy. What I like about that is you can really scale it up or down to whatever scale you want. So on the level of an individual home, this is what it looks like. So reducing demand, that comes through a number of ways. First is just installing more energy efficient equipment. So things like LED light bulbs, Energy Star refrigerators and dishwashers, etc., more efficient water heaters and furnaces. It also refers to weatherizing your home with insulation, dual pane windows, things like that. So yeah, you don't actually have to run your furnace as much and it's not having to work as hard. And it also refers to, like I mentioned, the demand response. So using energy at non-peak hours, so during the middle of the day or overnight, rather than those 4 to 9 evening hours. And then finally, of course, there is some behavior change. we all need to do our part of, turning off lights when we're not in the room and air drying clothes, things like that. It's up to you how much of that you want to do, but it's really a mix of more efficient equipment plus some behavior change. The second is the clean electricity. So this is to a degree happening on its own, and eventually we'll get there as a state. But for now, you can speed up that process. Really, the ideal solution here would be for every house to install solar panels and battery storage, so everyone has their own electricity. This isn't always possible, and so if not, then again, EBCE or East Bay Community Energy, they actually allow you to opt up your electricity plan. So everything you consume comes from renewable sources. And then finally, of course, replacing all of that gas equipment with electric heat pumps. Next slide, please.
Okay, and I'm just going to do a time check for you. It's
Okay.
7:18.
Yeah, I actually think I can skip past most of the slide. I just want to get you all to think about your home really as a system. And so a lot of people, if they're having comfort issues at home, their first instinct is to replace their furnace, when really that might not be the cause. If you have a drafty home, if you have a lack of insulation, we really want to get you to think about those things first, and how all the various systems in your home interact. And so it's not just about one appliance, it's about the whole home. And so that's kind of the mindset that we think about at Bayren. You can move on. Okay, again, I think I already addressed a lot of this, but electrification isn't just about the climate. There's a lot of other benefits for you. And even if you are a climate denier, there's still a lot of reasons to go all electric. One, I mentioned the health, and indoor air quality benefits, safety, really no risk of gas leaks and burns or explosions. Comfort, so they provide heating and cooling. They're a little bit more quiet than traditional gas furnace or system. And then if it's done right, it can save you a lot in your utility bill. You can move on. And actually just skip to the next one. So I assume that a lot of people here have at least heard of a heat pump or know generally what it is if you are joining this webinar, but it's still relatively new, at least here in North America. So I want to give a little bit of an overview of how they work. Because basically it's impossible to talk about electrifying your home without talking about heat pumps, because with the exception of stoves, basically every other gas appliance, the alternative to that would be a heat pump. So it's a little bit hard because I can't see you all, but and you're off video, but normally if this is in person, I ask everyone to raise their hand if they have a heat pump in their home already. And I'm guessing, okay, I see a couple, but everyone should have their hands raised, because if you have a refrigerator in your home, you have a heat pump. And that's kind of the easiest way I can think to explain it. It's like a refrigerator or an air conditioner, but in reverse. So basically how it works, rather than a gas burning appliance, which basically you have a fuel source, you burn that fuel source, it takes that potential energy of the molecules in that gas, turns it into thermal energy, and then transfers that into either your living room or your water heater. So rather than that process of making heat pumps simply just move heat from one place to another. And so they're much, much more efficient. The gas appliance, really the absolute highest theoretical efficiency you can have is 100%, which would mean for every 1 unit of energy you put in, you get 1 unit of usable heat energy in return. Whereas a heat pump, because it's just moving energy, you can actually, for every 1 unit of energy you put in, get 3 to 4 units of heat into your home. So they are much, much more efficient. And there's a lot of benefits, other benefits from that. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to get too technical here about how they work. Basically, it uses refrigerant tubes or fluids which absorb heat from the outside air, and then it blows a fan and it blows air over those hot tubes. The air then absorbs that heat and transfers it into your home. And the great thing about these is that they can work in reverse as well. So actually, you can go to the next slide. So when we're talking about a heat pump for heating and cooling, they can go both directions, and it's basically a 2-for-1 furnace and air conditioner all wrapped up in one system. I'm sure Nicole will talk a little bit more about that. But that's really one of the biggest benefits that we see, especially in an area like the Bay Area where temperatures are rising. We're getting more and more really hot days in the summer. And we traditionally people haven't needed AC around here, but it's becoming more and more necessary. So heat pumps, again, heating and cooling, they're much more efficient. The other benefits quickly that I'll touch on is they're really flexible. So if you have a central ducted furnace, you can really just plop the heat pump in its place, keep your existing ductwork, and it'll work right that way. There's also mini splits or package terminal systems, which are more distributed. And so you would have a separate unit in different parts of your house. And the great benefit of that is, say you spend most of your time in one room, you can only heat and cool that room and not waste energy heating parts of the house that you're not using. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, really quickly, heat pump water heaters, again, basically work the same way, except instead of running cool air over a hot coil, you're running the hot coil through cool water and transferring it into the water that way. The other benefit of these is that I mentioned demand response multiple times. You can basically charge these during the day. So you run them when electricity is cheap. And then if the tank is well insulated, you'll have hot water to last you all night and you don't have to pay that higher rate to heat your water in the evenings. The other benefit is also they release cold air on the other side. So if you have this in your garage and your garage gets too hot, it can help cool down your space a little bit. So I think that's all I have. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes over.
Right?
But pass it on to Nicole.
Yeah, so thanks for attending today. I just wanted to kind of spend a few minutes to share my experience as a homeowner going through this process of switching from our gas furnace to heat pumps. Um, and yeah, so I think just starting like, thinking about planning ahead for this, because I think a situation people can run into is, your gas furnace breaks or it's at end of life and you are really cold. It's like, the end of December and temperatures are dropping and you don't really have a plan, so you just swap it out. So one thing to think about is kind of starting to plan ahead for this and starting to kind of commit to making that change if that's something you want to do. Um, so for me, like we bought our home in 2020 and decided to kind of spend a year in there to see how the temperature was in the house with the existing gas furnace and no AC. Um, and then as we experienced heat extremes in the summer, we realized that we wanted to add cooling to our home for comfort. Um, Another big piece of it was that there's the combination of like high smoke days and hot days where otherwise you might open your windows to cool your house, but that can result in really bad, poor indoor air quality. So being able to add cooling without opening our windows was going to be very helpful as well. We also knew that our furnace was actually oversized for our house. It broke right before we installed the heat pump anyway. So if we hadn't been planning ahead, we might have just installed a new furnace. Um, and kind of like we touched on at the beginning, you also want to think about increasing your home efficiency through insulation or air sealing. We already had attic insulation, but we hadn't done anything into our crawl space. And as I'll get into, we decided to combine installing the heat pump with doing some additional insulation under the house to kind of increase that efficiency and increase just the heating retention. And then one thing we also considered was, does it make more sense to have that ducted system or mini splits for different rooms? Our house, I think there's a few neighborhoods that are like this around San Leandro. We have that um, what's it called? The split level house, where you have different floors and you might not have one specific room that you spend a lot of time in. So for us, it made more sense to do the ducted system, but that might be a consideration for you as well. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and then financial considerations. It is, we'll get into the financials later of what my experience was, but it can be a significant investment. So you want to be thinking about, how much are you currently paying for electric and gas to heat and cool your home? I know a lot of people got hit with really big gas bills this winter because we had some unusually cold periods. Gas prices were really high. Do you also already have solar panels or a battery? Are you planning to install those? So that can be one way to offset these increased electric costs. Thinking about how you want to pay for that, cash, home equity, there's loans, there's a specific program that our contractor pointed us to called Real Energy Financing. So there's some specific programs out there. And then of course there's these rebates, there's these new tax credits, which we'll talk about later, that in the end can really substantially reduce the final cost. So for us, we were paying for gas heating, we weren't paying for electric cooling. We did end up installing solar panels that the same year, last year in 2022, as part of kind of this commitment to electrifying our home and thinking ahead about offsetting those costs. Okay, next slide. Yeah, and then kind of the next step, like with any home improvement project, is to talk to contractors, get your quotes, plan out your system. We worked with a contractor who was one of the BayREN approved contractors, and that unlocks some certain rebates for you if you work with one of those contractors. And they also specialized in energy efficiency upgrades. So we combined our heat pump with replacing our duct system to resize that specifically for the heating and cooling loads per room of our house. So that was sort of engineered at the same time. We combined that with air sealing, a vapor barrier in the crawl space. And I said we already had attic insulation, we had some newer windows. So the first step with this was the contractor came in, they measured the air leakage in our home. If you were here at the solar webinar, you saw Stephanie's photo of a blower door test to see how airtight your house is. They mapped our square footage, our layout, and they basically used an engineering model to calculate how large the heat pump needed to be in order to heat and cool our home within a normal temperature range on like the hottest and coldest days. That also like modeled where the optimal location for those registers were in our house, where the ductwork should go. And in the end, like we combined the heat pump with these other upgrades as well. The installation took about 3 weeks total. And then we had a city inspection. We had some additional measurements that qualified us for some rebates. So like an independent person comes in and like measures your duct leakage, and that qualifies you for certain rebates. And then you wait a few months to get those rebates. So I think our install was completed like April, May last year, and we were getting rebates by around August. So yeah, so this is just if you're thinking about a contractor, thinking about, do you want to combine with other stuff, or do you just want to swap out a furnace for something and get AC? There's some considerations. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so our system, like I said, was ducted. So this is a photo of the outdoor unit. It looks like an air conditioner, but it's skinny. It's like, maybe 6 inches wide. So it's pretty low profile outside the house. And then there's a larger air handler that's in our crawl space, and couldn't even really get a good photo of that because it's covered in insulation and surrounded by ducts. Yeah, we replaced our duct system. We changed the location of air intake and some registers. You can see this photo of the vapor barrier and air sealing in our crawl space that happened before they did the installation of the ductwork. So there's this really thick plastic layer that goes in to minimize moisture, and then all of those old-fashioned vents that we all have in our crawl spaces, those all get sealed up, and then there's basically a fan that's at one of those that's bringing in air circulation from the outside. And yeah, it pretty much takes up the whole crawl space, but most of the duct runs were underneath the house. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to give a financial snapshot and kind of go through all these different components. And it's again, this is like not necessarily, you might not do all of these things. You might add on more things. You might add on additional insulation if you're thinking about this process. But just to give what our experience was, basically the heat pump itself was about 17,800. The duct replacement was about 11,000, and then air sealing was about 4,000. And then for rebates, we ended up getting a rebate from Bayren for the duct replacement. We didn't have an existing AC, so there's different like qualifications for the rebates, and we can get into those maybe after my section. Um, but if you happen to have gas furnace and AC already, you would get additional rebates through Bayren. We also got a rebate through a program called Tech California that was pretty significant. So in the end, that contributed almost $5,000 off the total cost of this. But I think important to note that this was installed in 2022 with the passage of the IRA, with these additional rebates coming in and incentives in 2023. This number could go up a lot for you if you're thinking about doing this. And I'm not going to get into the details here because I think we're going to cover it after this. But there's a lot of additional funds available depending on income, depending on your total project cost that might be available. But my understanding is, we have tax credits here for 2023, and the rebate programs are still getting implemented. So these are just estimates. And this is so dependent on like your house size, your needs, your heating and cooling needs, your existing energy efficiency. If you want to add a mini split to like your kid's nursery or something, that's going to be a very different project than replacing your whole house duct system with something. So, I think as with any project, talking to contractors and getting multiple quotes, will help you kind of understand what's the best thing for your house. And we all have these weird old houses, that don't have many upgrades until we go in there and actually modernize them. Okay, so I think I have one more slide. Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to talk about like what is it like to use a heat pump? Like how is it different from a gas furnace or AC? Like what does it feel like? What is my experience been with like how it actually works on like hot and cold days? So different thing about heat pumps is they run for a longer period of time to get to temperature. So it's not like you turn on the furnace and you have 100-degree air coming out of the vents. It's much closer to the actual temperature you want your house to be. It's much lower, it's quieter, it's not blowing as fast as you would with a gas furnace or an AC. It's very quiet, so we don't even really know that it's on when it's running. It's just if you have to kind of put your hand over the vent to realize that it's working. And I think I mentioned this at the beginning. One bonus, better indoor air quality. We're not opening our windows. We're not having allergens come in. We didn't have a really bad smoke season this past year, but of course that's really dependent on where the fires are and which way the wind is blowing. So for cooling, we're pretty conservative with stuff. So we set our cooling temperature to 78 degrees. We set our heating temperature this winter to 64 overnight and 68 to come on in the morning and kind of heat up the house. So for time of use rates for electricity, that means that we are running the cooling during peak hours, but it sort of overlaps with the late in the day solar production. So there's a little bit of offset there. But then the heating is generally running off peak because it's kind of turning on at like 5 a.m. or something. And yeah, so what happened like on the hottest and coldest days last year? So we had those heat waves in 2022 in the summer. When it was over 100 degrees in San Leandro, we stayed at 78 in the house. It was incredibly comfortable. It was actually amazing. Like yeah, I've never really lived with AC in the Bay Area before, so it was for me it was really nice to have that comfort in the house. The coldest days this winter, we still the house still heated up, it still stayed warm, but the efficiency does drop around 30 or 40 degrees. It's not like it doesn't work, but it does just take a little bit longer to heat up the house. So that's what we've noticed. So I think those are all caveats. It's all very climate dependent. We've had some unusually cold days this year for sure. So I think like generally it's just functioning very normally like you would expect from a heating system. And still, you know, heating and cooling the house to the temperature that we want it to be at. Um, and yeah, this photo is just a snapshot of what our gas usage was December of last year versus December of this year, and that's basically all getting rid of that usage from the gas furnace. So it's pretty much just a flat line throughout the year. Yeah, I've been seeing some hands up, Patty. Do you want me to take questions now, or do you
We
want
could
to wait till
take
the
a break,
end?
I guess, and take some questions now.
Yeah, and I'll say the next section is on rebates and the tax credits and stuff. If you have questions about that, we could probably wait on that. But I think if you have questions about like just the setup, we can go
Yeah.
ahead. I
So what?
see Kamala, do you want to?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Nicole. What is your house's like square footage that might
Yeah.
help understand?
Yeah. So we're about 1,500 square feet. Um, and like a split level, so we have like a basement room, a main floor, and like an upper story.
Um,
I thought there was another hand.
Doug had his hand up. I don't know if he still has a question, but it's not up anymore.
Okay.
So why don't we take the chat questions afterward?
Sure, sounds good. Okay. Okay,
Okay.
if there's no other questions specifically.
Oh, Doug's had his hand back
Yes.
up. Okay, go ahead,
Go
Doug.
ahead.
Well, I'm not going to wait. I don't know if you want to tackle this, Nicole. It kind of goes back to what Chris was talking about in terms of the heat pump water heater. You know, more than 10 years ago, I changed from the traditional water heater to a tankless that's on the front of my house right now. So what are we saying now that we really want to go all electric? So the gas powered tankless gas water heater is not the way to do it? Or I mean, what is the trade-off if I were to convert from my tankless gas water heater now to a heat pump water heater?
Chris.
Yeah, I can take that one. So I think of gas water heaters, tankless is the best option. We normally find, at least with gas tank water heaters, their lifespan is 10 to 12 years on average. Some of them last more, but you normally after 10 to 12 years, you'll want to start thinking about replacing your water heater anyways. So normally my advice is I wouldn't go ahead and replace a new water heater. If you just got a new tankless gas water heater, I wouldn't replace that right away. Because we also have to worry about the embodied costs of manufacturing that and everything else. And there will be potentially more rebates coming in a couple of years. But I'd say if it's already 10 years old, maybe start thinking about in the next year or so, getting some quotes and start thinking about that. And if you really, I think the most environmentally friendly thing would be once that existing water heater starts to fail, replace it with a heat pump.
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, you exactly guessed my situation. My old system from 2009 just went out in the last 6 months. Silly me, I didn't realize I was supposed to be flushing it every year. And so I just bought a new one. So I guess I'll be in the market in 10 years or so. But
yeah, it's hard. And I mean, with water heaters, especially, it's hard to go more than a few days without hot water, and getting a heat pump can take, it can take a while if you need to get any electrical work done or things like that. And so that's one of the biggest challenges. And so we would recommend just, once you get to that 10-year mark, start thinking about it and get a quote for if you need to do any electrical work to kind of prepare yourself for when it does fail.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I see we have Linda Flores.
Yeah, hi, this is Carlos. I'm the husband.
Okay.
I had heard that, or we've heard, so if you get a heat pump without solar, that the electricity cost could be really high. So I don't know if you guys could have any response to that question.
Yeah, so there was a question in the chat about this as well. And I would say, just like, for December, basically, if you go by like the kilowatt hours per month, if you look on your PG&E bill, that's kind of what those, if you look on the electric side of that graph, like that's what it shows per month. I think we were at maybe more around like 300, 350 a month, before putting in the heat pump. And then like in December, that usage jumped up by about 100 to like 450 to 500. So you could probably calculate that out a little bit. Um, and yeah, I feel like it would be good to do a better calculation breakdown of this, because you have to factor in the difference in electric costs as well as the increased gas costs this year. Um, with solar, it definitely helps, obviously. Even without it, I think that we probably would have had a much lower bill versus just using gas for heating this winter.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll just add on briefly. Farron, we always talk about really efficiency first, and if you want to replace your furnace with a heat pump, do all of the weatherization and ductwork first, and that'll if I've heard a number of examples of people who didn't do that. They just went in and replaced their furnace, and then their electricity costs or their utility costs went through the roof. So electricity is more, and so it's really important to make sure that your home is ready for it and that you kind of get as small as a system as you can. And Bayron does offer rebates for installation and all of that as well.
Donna Chang.
Donna, you're on mute.
You're muted. You're on.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
So we also have a gas tankless water heater. So I'm just wondering, so with a heat pump tanks, like, do we have to put it indoor? Because then if so, like, we'll have to figure out where to put it at home. Or can that part, that cylinder thing, can that be outside?
Good question. So there's two pieces of a heat pump water heater. There's the tank itself, which holds the water, and then there's the heat pump unit, which is the condenser unit. Normally that just goes right on top of the tank and it would go indoors. There are some considerations because it's a little bit taller than a normal one and requires some airflow. So depending on the space, it would be possible to have the tank indoors and the heat pump condenser unit outdoors, have a split system like that. If you don't even have room for the tank indoors, that might be a little bit hard. I suppose it would be possible to put it outdoors, but it might not be as efficient because it would just lose more heat to the outside air, especially during the winter. Yeah, I feel like it would probably work to build like a little shed or wooden structure around it and just make sure it's really well insulated. But I think that would be a question for a contractor.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, normally they would go indoors though.
I see. All right. Thank you.
Amy.
Okay. I really appreciate all the addressing all this tankless water heater thing, because I have the same issue as Donna. I would have no place because I redid and 13 years ago. So you're getting me scared thinking that our tankless water heater is going to go out, and anything about like what we were supposed to be doing what to it, because it's been fine. But knock on wood. But I had another
I think
question.
the tankless might have a slightly longer lifespan than tanked, so maybe you have a couple more years.
Yeah, well, actually I have two questions, because I wonder if there's other alternatives for heating water that that would be separate from the heat pump, maybe a passive solar water heater, which could be maybe on the roof or in the attic where it tends to get warm. So I guess that's a possibility. But the other question that I had, because I didn't hear this addressed, I don't have any ducts. I'm not planning to put in any ducts. So I was curious if the cost of a ductless system, how does that compare to the ducted system for the
Yeah, so we didn't go very far, like looking into the ductless system, but my sort of basic understanding is that it kind of just scales with the number of rooms that you want to put that mini split in. I think there's an outdoor unit that can function for multiple rooms, and then you're just adding those different heads like in the walls of those rooms. So I think like if you're just doing one room, I think it would probably be quite a bit less. It could be comparable once you start doing several different ones, but probably a better answer to get some quotes from contractors on that. Yeah.
And how,
Yeah.
and maybe Chris, you're going to be addressing this, like which I heard Nicole refer to vendors which Bayren, I guess, had vetted. How many vendors have you vetted?
Yeah, so okay, a couple of things to address here. So yeah, Nicole, I think that's a good answer. I think in general, the mini splits are probably slightly cheaper. But again, it varies so much home to home. If you are
Yeah.
only doing one room, there's actually a third option, which is called package terminal heat pump, where there's not even an outdoor unit. It's almost like what they have in hotel rooms, but a nicer version of that, where it just goes into the wall and it's just one single thing. Those are the cheapest, but if you're doing multiple rooms, then the mini split's probably better. To answer your first question about the water heating, solar water heating is an option. I don't know a ton about that, so I can't give you too much information, but yeah, another basically you could have a tank and then there's a unit on your roof that collects the solar energy and warms the water with it. Normally those wouldn't be enough to work on their own. Normally you'd want that and then an additional water heater kind of as a backup. But that is an option. And then I think your other question was about contractors. So Bayron, I'll get to this when we get to that part of the presentation, but in order to get a rebate through Bayron, you have to go through a Bayron participating contractor. I don't know off the top of my head. I want to say in Alameda County, we have maybe 60 or 70 active contractors in our network, and it's always growing. Contractors are really in demand right now, just in general, and especially the Bayron ones. So there can be a bit of a wait time. Nicole, I don't know if you experienced that.
Oh, yeah, no, I should
Uh,
mention that. I think we we kind of booked them in like September of 2021, and yeah, our install was like 6 months later. And that's again the planning ahead thing is kind of can be helpful because you're kind of ready and you know when it's going to happen. And we kind of we installed it in between the cold days and the hot days, which was really great. So we didn't have any time period where we were sort of waiting for the install. But yeah, I can imagine like with the new tax credits, it's just going to become more and more popular. Hopefully that means more of our contractors will be installing these as well, but there could be a bit of a wait for sure.
Yeah, I know Bayron and PG&E and a bunch of other organizations are really focused on training more contractors right now, but that takes time. So for the next couple of years, I expect that there's might be some long wait times.
Okay, we're gonna hold off on questions for now and just make sure we get through the rebates and so forth. So I'm gonna hand it back to Chris and I'm gonna move to the next slide for rebates and resources.
Yeah, and I think hopefully we can get these slides sent out. So I will probably go through these pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you go to the next slide. So Bayron, it's the main program for single family homeowners is the Home Plus program. This is what Nicole used. Essentially, we offer up to $5,000 in rebates for a wide range of energy efficiency and electrification upgrades. I'll get to some of these other offerings as well, but you can go to the next slide.
Oops.
So when it comes to heat pumps, both for I kind of split this up into water heater rebates and HVAC rebates. So for water heaters, Bayron offers, there's actually two different rebates that we have for water heaters. The first is through the Home Plus program. It would just be if you install a new heat pump water heater, you get a $1,000 rebate if you use one of our contractors. And then the contractor would also get a $1,000 rebate. So that's total $2,000 in incentives. It's up to the contractor how much of that $1,000 that they get that they want to pass on to you. So we can't guarantee that it'll like lower the cost by 2,000, but it is pretty significant. I think the the average cost of materials and labor for a new heat pump water heater is like $4,000 to $7,000. So take $2,000 off of that, plus now the federal tax incentives and other rebates coming. They're really starting to become a lot more competitive with gas water heaters. And then with HVAC, so we have all these upgrades for building shell upgrades. We can send out a document that really lays that out in detail, but up to $3,000 for that. And then the heat pump for HVAC. Nicole mentioned this. It's really frustrating, but I have $1,000 rebate for heat pumps for space and heating and cooling. But if you currently have a central ducted system and you are trying to install a central ducted heat pump, but you don't already have AC, you would not be eligible for that rebate. It's really counterintuitive and frustrating, but basically the reason is how we get our funding from the state. The state is worried that because it adds the air conditioning load, that people might get a heat pump who don't already have AC, and then they're going to use the AC so much that it kind of undoes all of the benefit they get from the efficiency for heating. So Bayern is working really hard to get that switch so that we can offer that to everyone. But right now, that $1,000 rebate is a little bit, it depends on your situation, whether or not you would be eligible for that. We do also have a bonus. So if you combine the building shell upgrade with the heat pump, you get an extra little rebate. But yeah, if you do all of these, the max you can get is 5,000. You can go to the next slide. So this is what the sample process looks like to get the Bayern rebate. So there's a couple optional steps you can take at the start, which we highly recommend. The first is to start by speaking with a home energy advisor. I think in a couple slides, I'll share the info for that. It's basically a free call line where you can get advice on any phase of your project. They can help connect you to contractors, answer technical questions, help you compare quotes. It's a really great resource. So that's a great place to start if you're like just starting to think about this. Talk to an energy advisor, kind of help them plan out your next steps. We also have a home energy score. This is kind of a lighter version than what Nicole did. It doesn't do the blower door test, but they would have someone come out, look at all the appliances and systems in your home, and then give you like a customized list of recommendations. The first step that's actually mandatory would be, again, to choose one of the Bayern contractors. On our website, you can go and filter by language spoken, where they serve, what sort of services you need. So you get a list of contractors to work with. You would basically hire that contractor to install the upgrades. Make sure you let them know you want to get that Bayern rebate, and then they'll make sure that what they're installing is actually eligible. They'll need to do a quick safety test. Even with heat pumps, as long as you still have anything in your home that burns gas, they'll need to do this combustion test just to make sure there's no gas leaks in your home. And then a couple of weeks later, you will get your rebate check in the mail. So it's really straightforward. The contractor submits the paperwork on your behalf. So really all you need to do is hire the contractor and sign off, and then you'll get a check in the mail. So it's really simple. Next slide, please. And then we were talking before everyone joined that this is a little bit of an awkward time to be doing this presentation, because there's the Bayern rebates, which already exist, and then there's this basically tsunami of other like incentives coming down over the next couple of years. So the Inflation Reduction Act passed last year. There's two pieces to that. There's the tax credits, which went live January 1st. So you can access those now. That you can get $2,000 tax credit for heat pump, either HVAC or water heater system. I think it's just one or the other. I don't think you can stack them as far as I know, but that'd be an additional $2,000. And then there's going to be, I think, yeah, up to $8,000 in rebates. We don't know when those are going to become live. My guess is it'll be early 2024. And then there's a couple of state additional on top of everything else. And then there's a couple of statewide programs. So there's the Tech Clean California program. This actually was live last year. Nicole took advantage of that. It was so popular that they ran out of money in like 2 months. And so
we almost missed it because
yeah, it was
we
really
had to
sudden.
basically get
like,
it installed by like May.
Yeah, like people thought they had all this time, and then they said, hey, we're almost out. You have to reserve it next week. It was a little bit messy, but they learned a lot of lessons and are going to relaunch that, I think, in March. So come March, there will be more rebates for the HVAC side of things from that. And then in summer, there's another statewide program called the SCHIP program that will have more rebates for the heat pump water heaters. So there's a lot happening. You're probably more confused after the slide than you were beforehand. I get it. I'm confused too. But check back in a couple of months, and I think we'll have a lot more information. And if you go to the next slide.
I just have I just want to ask that. So the tax credit on this particular thing with the IRA is not a 30% tax credit. It's a flat 2,000.
Yes, I believe so. The 30% I think is for solar
Okay.
battery systems. And I think
Okay.
for heat pumps, it's a flat 2,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Just want to pitch again the Home Energy Advisor Service. They're tracking all of these rebate programs and all this funding. And so if you call them kind of as information becomes available, they'll be able to really explain to you the most recent updates, and they can walk you through everything that you're eligible for. So again, if you decide to take this up in a few months, I would highly recommend starting with them and just getting the lay of the land on what you qualify for. And so here's the phone number. You can also go on our Bay Run website and fill out an interest form, and they'll contact you.
Okay.
Just a couple other links to get started. I'm not going to talk about these, but slides will go out so you have them. And I think that is all I have.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just, so we're out of time. We will stay on for anybody who can stay on and wants to get questions answered. I will also be sending out these slides as well as the video to anybody who wants to rewatch or send to somebody else or look at the slides. So you'll have all these resources that you can tap into from the slides. But if you have a question, you want to raise your hand. And I think Nicole's also been answering in the chat. Yes.
Yeah, I've been trying to cover some of them. I think there might be a few more. So if we've missed your question, just feel free to type it again or just raise your hand and speak up.
Yeah, and you also can email me actually if you have questions that don't get answered. Well, actually, that would be silly because you can just call the advisor, I think, and ask the same questions. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, for most of these questions, I think are things that the
If you have
advisors can help. I
specific
did see one
questions for
question in there.
Nicole,
Sorry, I saw one question that I want to just address of what's the cost of the Home Energy Advisor. It is totally free, zero costs. So definitely use it.
yeah, that's a great place to start. Yeah, so Kamala, you have a question, your hand up.
Yeah, I just wondered, the smart thermostat, does that have to be connected like a wireless one, like the Nest, or is it one that's programmable?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know Nest would qualify for that. There's just kind of a list of approved models. So let's see if I can actually find the link right now.
So
information.
I'll jump in here. So when we had the heat pump installed, they just automatically installed a smart, I guess it's a smart thing. It's called Ecobee. I don't know, but you can you can either do your programming on it right directly there, like a regular thermostat, or you can do it on your phone if you want to connect and do all that kind of Wi-Fi stuff.
Yeah, I think it's typical that when you get a new system installed, the thermostat will come with it.
Yeah, and our heat pump, I should mention, it's
Okay, sorry, just to answer the question, it just, as long as it's listed as an Energy Star qualified smart communicating thermostat. So you can find the whole list of eligible ones just on the Energy Star website.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say our heat pump, because it's like a dual stage sort of system, like something like a Nest doesn't really work perfectly with that. So it came with its own thermostat. That is not a smart thermostat necessarily, although it runs over Bluetooth basically. So we chose not to like swap it out with something else. It's possible that there'll be better technology that meshes better with those in the future. but we ended up getting rid of the Nest that we had and just in favor of the one that came with the system.
So here's one from someone, Chris, and I'll let you take that. Is there a premium cost to work with a Bay Run contractor? Seems like a lot of tax incentives and rebates are offset by premium pricing.
So yeah, that's a good question. We don't regulate what kind of prices our contractors can set. So that's kind of my official answer. My unofficial answer is we have a lot of contractors. I would say just get multiple quotes.
And you're certainly
So
welcome to
generally,
get another
our
quote from a
contractors-
contractor, but you won't get the rebate.
Exactly. And our contractors are vetted, they receive training in this, and there's quality control and assurance. And so you're going to get someone who's going to do good work. And I'll also add, the electrification space is still pretty new and pretty small. There's not that many contractors that know how to install a heat pump or heat pump water heater in the Bay Area. And the vast majority of those who do are already in the Bay Run program. And so I think to the extent that there's a premium for them, it just comes from the fact that it's a kind of a niche skill set that not a lot of contractors have, not from the fact that we're given rebates.
Yeah, and I think part of the cost that just when I think about the investment in it was the engineering and sort of consideration of the house as a system, and thinking about, just comparing that to the gas furnace that we got when we bought the house, where nothing was the right size. It was way too big for the house. It was not thoughtfully put into as a system. And so upgrading to something that actually was scaled and sized correctly and as energy efficient as possible, I think that's good to do. Yeah.
So there's another question here. Are you able to use multiple rebates or just one? And I don't know, Amy, if you mean for Bay Run specifically or across the board.
Yeah,
I think Nicole answered that question, but
Oh, she did? Okay, got it.
Yeah,
I
I'll let Chris confirm. Just, I don't think these programs talk to each other or tell each other you got a Bay Run rebate, so you don't qualify for a federal rebate, but I'm not sure if that's really.
Yeah, the Bay Run the IRA incentives and the tech and SCHIP and Bay Run will all stack with each other. Basically, as long as the funding for the rebate comes from a different source, they can stack. And so you wouldn't be able to, for example, do a Bay Run rebate and a PG&E rebate for the same equipment, because Bay Run is funded by PG&E ratepayers. There's a fee on your PG&E bill that ultimately goes to fund Bay Run programs. And so you wouldn't be able to stack Bay Run with PG&E, but if it's a federal source of funds, that's a totally different pot of funds, and you can stack them.
And I don't know if this has been answered, but is there any thinking that waiting is an advisable strategy to take advantage of for the rebates, or are there pitfalls to waiting?
There are. It's hard to answer. As I mentioned last year, the tech incentive, for example, they ran through all their money in a couple of months, and people who had planned on getting that weren't able to because they waited too long. And so there's pitfalls like that. There's, if your furnace or water heater fails and you need an emergency placement, that can add on to costs. So there's definitely pitfalls to waiting. It depends on the situation. Sometimes it would make more sense, but it's really hard to answer. The one piece of advice I would give is just get started now, because, as we said, there's long wait times and there's a lot of work you can do that precede the actual installation of the new equipment. So whether that's insulating your attic, upgrading your electrical panel, even just doing the engineering work, there's a lot that can happen ahead of that. So as much of the prep work that you can do ahead of time would be the best. Nicole, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. It's I think installing in 2023, you're gonna get there's a lot of rebates that will be available, even with just the tax credits. as far as I know, like in the language of the IRA, it is talking about 2023 as everything's starting. But yeah, again, you know, if you think that this process might like take 6 months, so it's probably worth getting started, at least like sort of figuring out what kind of system you want, what works best for your house. Definitely thinking about like that overall energy efficiency picture as well.
Somebody had a question about, do you need to upgrade your electrical panel to install the heat pump? And I can probably answer that. And the answer really is it depends on your electrical panel, and how much you currently, how you're loaded currently. So that only really your contractor can answer that.
Yeah. There are
Yeah,
some creative solutions that I've seen for people with like only 100 amps of service where you can get, for example, like lower power, like 120-volt heat pump water heater instead of 240-volt, which takes longer to heat the water but uses less power. You can also like have circuit splitters. So for example, like an EV charger and a water heater could be on the same circuit, and so only one or the other runs at the same time. So there's creative solutions, but yeah, it depends.
probably like if you're fully electrifying your house, eventually you will need to upgrade the panel.
Yeah.
Like we were able to do solar and the heat pump without having to do that. Probably we will next time we need to replace one of our gas appliances or add like a charger, a car charger.
Yeah. I don't
I
see
think the
any other
IRA
ones
does
that are on
have.
here that haven't been answered, but
Oh yeah, sorry, Nicole, you already put them in the chat.
Oh, no worries.
The
Yeah.
IRA will have incentives for panel upgrades.
yeah.
Yes, because that's all part of the electrification picture is like
Mhm.
we're all gonna have to do this to like get rid of gas appliances. So
Yeah.
So I did have a question, just to confirm, there are no Bayren qualified rebates if your home currently has no AC or heating system.
Correct. Yeah, basically, again, because of the regulations around how we use our funds, we have to prove that it's reducing energy. And so if you're adding a load where there's not already an existing load, then we can't prove that. It's kind of
So if you have one of those old fashioned floor that's got gas coming in.
So no, if you have that, if you have like a floor or a wall heater, that would count as a heating source. And so if you want to replace that with like a heat pump mini split, that would qualify. Sorry, I thought you meant if you had no heating whatsoever.
Yeah, for how much would that, I didn't get from the chart what that was, $1,000?
That would be 1,000, yeah.
And I didn't hear anybody talk about in terms of income, you can get more. I didn't see anything relative to income there.
So Bayren's rebates are not income qualified, it's just flat.
Okay.
The IRA or the Inflation Reduction Act incentives, at least some of them will be income qualified.
Yeah, and I don't have it available right now, but there is a calculator that you can go to with the IRA that will show you a lot of this information. I will include that calculator link on our, when I send out the video and the presentation.
See, I don't know if this is the one you're talking about, but I've seen this one before. I'll put it in the chat from Rewiring America.
Yep, that's it.
Yep.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Go out and find out what rebates you can get and start planning. You don't have to pull the trigger, but start planning. Thanks so much. And we'll see you again. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying on late.
Mhm.
Thanks. Bye-bye.